Finding joy as a nurse leader is our episode topic. My guest is Susan Stacey, a registered nurse and the chief executive for Providence Health's Inland Northwest Service Area. So let's get started.
Welcome to the BRG Nurse Executive Podcast. BRG is a global consulting firm that helps organizations in disputes and investigations, corporate finance, and performance improvement and advisory. BRG's healthcare performance improvement practice offers multidisciplinary services to healthcare organizations. We focus on implementation with innovative, independent, and data-driven solutions. In the BRG Nurse Executive Podcast, we discuss improving patient care by advancing nursing leadership. For more information about BRG, please visit thinkbrg.com. Now here's your host, Nick Chmielewski.
Susan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. This is a great opportunity.
Before we get into our episode topic, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I currently serve as the chief executive for 5 hospitals in Eastern Washington for the Providence system of hospitals. Everything from 2 critical access hospitals to a 700-bed tertiary medical center over in Eastern Washington, and have been doing that for about the last 4 years. I'm a nurse by background, started as a pediatric and peds ICU nurse and worked my way through a variety of leadership roles, culminating about 4 years ago in this role as a chief exec. But I've been a manager, I've been a director, I've been a chief nurse officer, I've been a chief operating officer. So really have had a variety of leadership positions and have the joy of leading a variety of different kinds of hospitals, all with unique challenges.
So tell us a little bit more about that leadership journey.
I have been in healthcare for a little over 40 years and started out early on in my career as a peds ICU nurse. And like many nurses, somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, there's an assistant manager job. We think you should take it." And I never thought of myself as a leader. I thought I'd be a bedside nurse, forever. And so then I took that job, applied for and got it. And then, as also happened typically back in the 80s and 90s, the manager went on a maternity leave and never came back. The manager job was open in that unit. And once again, somebody tapped me on the shoulder, and I was young. I was a 28-year-old first-time nurse manager in a unit where most everyone else was older and more experienced than I was in the clinical practice, and had the opportunity to pull that team together. Did a variety of things there, including helping to build the Sacred Heart Children's Hospital, which was once in a lifetime career opportunity. And then I was in that job for about 15, 20 years as I was raising my family, and then didn't want to be seen as a one-trick pony. I went back and got my MBA. I chose a traditional MBA because back in the early 2000s, I wasn't sure what was happening with healthcare, which sounds a lot like what's going on now. And so all things old are new again. And I went back and got a traditional MBA. And then as I continued in my career and my kids got a little older, I decided I didn't want to be just seen as a pediatric person or just a children's hospital person. So ventured into the adult world, took a job as a nursing magnet coordinator and an orthopedic service line director. And that was a whole different world for me in orthopedics. Did that for a bit. And then once again was tapped on the shoulder. We had a resignation. I went back to the Children's Hospital for a period of time as their executive director. And then the chief nurse officer position came open. And I love nursing and I love operations. And for me, the CNO role was just what I wanted to do. And I thought that would be the pinnacle of my career at the time. Applied for and got that job. Once again, back into the adult world, as well as the Children's Hospital. And as I did that for about 6 years, we had some leadership shuffling again. Once again, we did an org redesign and added the chief operating officer role to my role as CNO in order to save money, frankly, because we were eliminating positions, and took that on, which was a great experience in getting outside of nursing and learning about how supply chain really works and more in depth in the OR and respiratory therapy and the lab and pharmacy and all sorts of other arms of healthcare that aren't just simply about nursing. And then had another opportunity to take on this role. And quite frankly, this was a perfect blend of my love for strategy, my love for operations, and really a strong commitment to the community because it allows me to get out in the community and really talk about important issues in healthcare with a voice that understands how healthcare's been over the last 30, 40 years.
Our topic today is finding joy as a nurse leader, and this episode is being released in the season of the winter holidays. Christmas is coming up. We hear so much about nurse leader burnout. How have you dealt with challenges, and what do you do to try to still find joy in your work?
I believe nurses in general love challenges. We're hardwired for challenges. When I was an ICU nurse, I loved when a really sick kid came in and everybody got together and you pulled in and tried to save or enhance that child's life. And there is a sense of synergy in the team and what happens to teams and challenges. And in difficult times, I think that really reveals the hard work of building teams. But that's where the joy comes, is watching everybody pull together and being the leader of that team and finding the way to pull together in one direction is really fulfilling. And I think we sometimes look at the challenge instead of the outcome we want. We look at what's wrong instead of what's right. And we're hardwired as nurses, because ultimately we're scientists, to figure out what's wrong and try to fix it. But the joy isn't in the finding of the problem or the focusing on the problem. The joy is focusing on the solution. And the more we can do that and help our teams look beyond the challenge to the solution, that's where the satisfaction came. And I always go back to my roots. I think most of us as nurses, on our busiest days or our busiest nights, looked back on them and went, we accomplished. And there's a sense of satisfaction in that.
One of the most difficult things leaders deal with is managing the multiple priorities and ever increasing workload. You just shared a story about how your workload and your priorities have just compounded over the years as your span of control has increased. Do you have any advice on how to best manage this for other leaders that are navigating up that lattice or up that career ladder and getting larger span of control?
The hardest lesson for most of us to learn is you can't do it all yourself. As nurses, we want to accomplish things. We've got to learn to delegate. And I believe delegation is the most important skill that you can learn. And good delegation, not just here's the task, go figure it out, but guidance and really mentoring someone as you're delegating tasks. But I have a couple of really practical things. One of the biggest differences between being a bedside nurse and being a nurse leader is when you're a bedside nurse, you're basically on a relay team. You take the patient for your shift and then you hand the baton over to the next person and you go home. When you're a nurse leader, there's no one to hand the baton to at the end of your shift. And so you have to get comfortable that everything isn't going to be done at the end of the day. And that is an uncomfortable space new leaders struggle with. You have to set your own business hours, because you cannot work all the time. And I think that's what sucks the life out of new leaders, is they're trying to do all things all the time. I hear about leaders on emails till 11 or 12 at night. I believe we have to set our own personal boundaries. The world will not set that for you. And my personal boundary is I don't work on weekends unless there is a true crisis. My staff knows they aren't going to get an email from me, nor will I read an email on Saturday and Sunday. If there's something crisis going on, they need to text me and then I'll fully engage. But if I don't set those boundaries for myself, the world isn't going to do that for you. The other thing that's very practical for me is I think mastery of email is a core competency that leaders have to get. I probably get 200 emails a day, ballpark. I can't possibly read everything all along. So I have a system of filing. I only have 3 files that I put my emails in. First of all, if I can touch it once and fix it and give the quick answer and get it off my plate, I do that. But I have 3 email files. One that's to do, that are things I need to get done, that are solely mine to do. One is waiting on someone else. So if I send an email to someone and say, hey, can you help me with this? I also take that email and throw it in a file so I don't forget to follow up on someone else that I delegated a task to. And the third is pending. And pending is stuff I need to sort later on. And once a week, I go through that pending and then I file stuff. Did I really need it? It's amazing how many things, when I look at the end of the week, I didn't need that email and I throw it in the deleted file. But my email box, I looked this morning, my email box has 20 emails in it. And those are new from last night. I don't do well with chaos. And so and there's a lot of chaos that happens without trying. So I try not to let my desk be chaotic, my email box be chaotic, because it's hard to prioritize when you don't have anything pop to the top. So the other thing I also do, because I made a mistake once, I made a mistake lots of times, but one in particular, where I missed a really important email from my boss that he needed something. And so I now color code all my boss's emails so that they flag differently, and I am drawn to things that are really important.
I've never heard of that 3 folder system before. I'm sure there's many others doing it, but where'd that idea come from? How long have you been doing it that way too?
I've been doing it this way for probably the last 10 years.
Okay.
And it actually came out of a book I read around, and it wasn't in emails, it was in file folders that you keep a file for each of these things. And I'm not a very good paper person. I'm really good with emails. So I adapted the concept of you have a to-do file, you have a thing a pending file to my emails. It helps me a lot to keep it organized. What I realized early on was I had so many files under different names, I couldn't find my files. That's gotten better now that technology's allowed us to search far better than what you can. There's not as much need to keep things in a special folder
Yeah.
because you can search and find everything you need anyway.
And just the pending that you talked about in your role, a lot of times I would imagine that you're being copied on a lot of things that you don't necessarily need to weigh in on. It's just FYI. Gosh, I'm going to put this in the pending folder and I'm just going to watch things unfold and I'll chime in if I need to, but it's probably going to resolve itself with me not getting involved. And at the end of the week, you move it out, you get rid of it, and you're done.
Absolutely. And that does happen. And that's also a way to empower your team to take care of things. If I jump in and comment on every email that I'm CC'd on, suddenly my voice is bigger than the other voices in that virtual room. And I want people to solve their own problems. But if I step in all the time, then they can't do that.
Yeah, you talked earlier about good delegation. Talk to me more about what that's like. What is good delegation? And on the same point, what is bad delegation?
Good delegation is delegating the responsibility and the authority to accomplish something with guidelines in place. And I'll use a simple example of building blocks. If I say you've got a bunch of colored blocks, I actually did this one time as a retreat activity. It's fun to do. You can try it with your teams. And you get a bunch of colored blocks and you say, build a tower. And then everybody builds a tower. I don't like your tower, that's not what I meant. But if I say build a tower and make sure that the colored blocks are aligned together so that there's lines of the colored blocks and that the larger blocks are on the bottom. You can put the top blocks wherever they make sense to you, but the principles are larger blocks on the bottom and colors need to be together. Now, when you build the tower is what I intended it to be. So you have to give some guidelines. I think most of us have heard of kind of the tight, loose, tight. What's the non-negotiable? What's the outcome? And then let people create in between. But if they don't have those parameters, then you're not going to be able to delegate and you're going to blame them. It's who had the problem. I didn't, the problem isn't the person who built the tower. The problem was the person who gave poor directions of how the tower should be built.
Yeah.
The other piece is you have to touch base in between. One of the things I've realized as a leader is people don't want to come to you and tell you that they need more help or they're confused or they don't know quite what they're doing. You have to go to them. So there's periodic touch bases of, hey, I'm just checking in. You doing okay with this? Do you need anything? How's it going? You running into any barriers? Is there a barrier I can help remove? It to me is a magic question because it doesn't say, do you need help? All of us want to believe we don't need help. But if I frame it in, are you running into any barriers that I can assist with? That opens up the conversation.
Talk to me about finding joy in difficult situations.
I believe that I am here where I'm sitting today for a purpose and a reason, and I am the right person for this time to deal with the challenge and to lead through the challenge. I am abhorrent of a victim mentality. This isn't my, oh, this is all happening to me and how did this happen, a mindset. One of the things I have to remind myself, particularly because we all have those dip moments. One of the things I remind myself in some of my most difficult challenges, and I have had some very difficult things where I can get down like everybody else gets down. One of the things I remind myself is you're not a victim of this. You not only chose this job, you worked really hard to get it. This is a personal choice every day. And that paradigm shift, that brings some joy. This is what I'm meant to do. It's the man in the arena. It's that, and I love it actually is sitting right across on my wall. It's being in the middle of it. We want to craft things, and that comes through tough times. I also still believe I'm here for the difficult work. If it was easy, you wouldn't need us. If as leaders, and that's not just in a chief exec role, that's in all roles. We're here because we're meant to be here. And I also believe we all need our safe people to talk with. So one of the ways I find joy in difficult situations is I have a couple of very close allies who I can speak to confidentially about challenges and maybe not everything, but most things. And they help give perspective. You've got to release it to release it. And then you can find the joy because you're not here again looking at the problem, you're looking at the solution. But sometimes you just have to gut through hard times and see where the other end is. I will give you a great example of another way. So a year ago, I made a very difficult decision that was publicly not popular at all. There was a protest outside my office. There was media coverage. It was pretty ugly. And I was exhausted and pretty well beat down. So I talked with a colleague of mine and I said, I'm not sure why I'm even doing this. I'd hit my wall because we all hit the wall. I'm not sure why I'm even doing this. I'm trying to do the best I can. I'm old enough to retire. Why am I even trying this anymore? And she listened to me and said, why don't you take a couple of days off? So I did. I took her advice. And I came back to my office and there were 2 pieces of paper on my office desk from her. There was no words. There was 1 piece of paper that had a list of historic program closures that had been done before I was in this seat years ago, back in the 70s and 80s. and listed all the closures that had occurred over time through our history of our organization. And the second piece of paper was a flyer for our in-house counselor. And I joked and I'm like, it was the perfect, I want you to have some perspective that you aren't the first who's walked this path. And oh dear God, girl, go get some perspective. And I went to the counselor for 2 or 3 sessions, got a little tune up, and was back ready to go. Sometimes you have to work for the joy.
That certainly was a pressure-filled situation, and the pressure of nursing leaders are increasing across the country. What approach do you use to manage the pressures of the job? You mentioned a little bit with some advice. You took some time off and then you got some help, but beyond that, how do you manage the pressure?
Get away, even if it's for 10 minutes. Go for a walk, get some fresh air. When you're in the middle of a very pressure situation, you do have to step away and get perspective. And you need to microdose the perspective, which means so in the previous situation, I'd let it bubble up too much. What I have learned is our brains and bodies get in this fight or flight mode. We all understand that as nurses, and you have to break that cycle. And there's some really good, simple ways to break the cycle. Breathing is one. I'm not a very good meditator because I'm a high energy person. So I will go on a 10-minute walk, either outside preferably, because I believe that fresh air really gives fresh perspective. I'll throw headphones on, some music. People see me just do a quick lap around the hospital, or inside if it's cold, because I live in a place where sometimes it's too cold to walk outside. But there is something about disconnecting yourself from the immediacy of the stress and of the pressure point that your body resets itself. And I think those things are helpful. I'm a talker, so I have to talk it out. Some people don't have to talk it out. Some people have to write it out. I hate journaling, but I do it because it helps me process things. So to me, journaling is like exercise. I don't really love it. I wish I did, but I know it's good for me. And so those disciplines, the same discipline I use in my email box, I use to help mitigate the pressure. The other part is you cannot let everyone else's issues become your issues. We tend to want to take on and fix everyone's problems. I'm very comfortable with self-care is called self-care for a reason. It's your job, not mine. And this may be unpopular, but I think we've moved to this place where the employer and the leader feels that they're responsible for everyone's work satisfaction, personal satisfaction. And quite frankly, we're not. We have to give people the tools to help them find their own peace in their work. And those tools are there. But part of it is I don't feel responsible for other people's emotions. I don't feel responsible for other people's reactions. They get to have their reaction, and I don't need to fix it. That has come with a lot of time and a lot of people yelling at me over a lot of years.
Yeah, it makes me think of the 1970s article in the Harvard Business Review that's been repurposed multiple times called Not My Monkey, and not
Yes.
trying to own monkeys that are not yours. Don't try to own other people's problems. They're theirs.
They're theirs. And they do impact the workplace sometimes. So you have to help them
Sure.
if they're willing. But if they're not willing, you got to let it go. You're not going to fix everyone.
We're in an environment right now where the pace of change is almost out of control. So what does resiliency look like? How do you build that as a leader, not just internally, but with your team in this environment where it is just non-stop change?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Part of it is not to catastrophize change as a leader, but normalizing change. We associate change with bad. Oh, this is changing. Everything's going to go wrong. A lot of times when you look back on changes, they're good changes. And so the more as a leader I can help share messages around change that says, hey, this is the next thing coming, not minimize them, but normalize it. This is what we do. We manage change. I also think that to help distinguish between change that is external, that some things you just don't have a choice in. We need to change. The CMS rules changed. Now we have to do this. How are we going to get through it? Once again, don't focus on the problem, focus on the solution, because you're not going to change CMS. I've had a tendency with my team, and I can be a little bit of a tough love kind of a leader, where I've sat with a group. Sometimes I'll say this, mostly physicians in this category, where they want to talk about how we're going to fix, how we're going to make this change go away. And I have literally sat in a meeting and said, look, I have a half hour with you guys. I am happy to talk about how bad it is, or we could use this half hour to talk about how we move forward. And it's your choice. And just sit there, and inevitably they're like, okay, let's figure it out then. Because people are smart and they want to give advice. They want to have solutions, but we get hung up in the why did this happen scenario rather than move forward. If I can help people normalize change, I think I've accomplished a lot, because that is not going to go away. And sometimes it's about perspective. It's helping people say, we don't want to be the same. Remember, reminding people. So I have this great analogy that I have, a saying that I use. As people romanticize the past when they don't want to change, there's this, it used to be this way, and why can't it be the same way? And I am fond of reminding people that we remember the log cabin, but forget the outhouse. We absolutely have a tendency to romanticize how things were without remembering, yeah, it wasn't all that great then either. Workloads have always been hard. When we went to electronic medical records, people were like, I can't find anything in these charts. I remember paper records where you literally couldn't find things in a chart because somebody had pulled it out and had taken it around a corner. Not everything is perfect.
What's the most important advice that you can give to our audience to remain joyful in the face of difficult times?
Take the work seriously, but not yourself. The work is important, but it is not the all of who you are. And don't take yourself so seriously. Like, we're flawed. We're funny human beings. If you can make a little bit of fun of yourself and see yourself, that is the opportunity that I think leaders can take with them.
Any closing thoughts as we wrap up this episode?
Leadership is the most amazing journey. Do not be a victim of it. Own it and really lean in. Our healthcare system needs bold, strong leaders to keep things moving forward in the right direction.
Finding joy as a nurse leader has been our episode topic. Susan Stacey, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the BRG Nurse Executive Podcast, which focuses on improving patient care by advancing nursing leadership. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and podcast guest and do not necessarily reflect the opinions, position, or policy of the guest employer, Berkeley Research Group, or their other respective employees and affiliates.